I came home from St. Luke's with hospital tape still on my skin and a padlock on my own pantry. Mint green doors, new chrome hasp, shiny as a threat. Inside, labeled bins, H and C in neat rows. Protein bars, collagen powder, not mine. The thermostat blinked 66 degrees, little lock icon glowing. I never said 66 a day in my life. "Oh," my daughter said, "you're back." They called it meal prep. I called it locking my food. That night I slept in the den listening to their treadmill upstairs. In the morning I saw a list on the fridge. Lock pantry. Then Linda, my neighbor, knocked. She set down soup and showed me her phone. There it was, my porch swing on Zillow, a big white banner, coming soon. A family trust I never signed. A signature that looked like mine, except my arm never trembles. At lunch, an elder law attorney spread a legal pad between my soup and my fury. She said 3 fronts: bank, bureaus, county, today. By nightfall, while they carried takeout through my kitchen, I had revoked every power they forged. And when the house was quiet, I took the bolt cutters from the garage, cut that padlock myself, and the sound it made on the tile, that was the sound of my name coming home. A knock sounded at the back door, 2 soft knuckles on glass, the kind of knock that knows its way. I opened the door for Linda Carter in pink slippers and a blue robe, her hair rolled in Velcro curlers like a fortress. She had a Tupperware with fogged-up sides and the confident smell of garlic and kindness. She said, "I saw the cab yesterday." She stepped down into my kitchen with the ease of a woman who has been here for 4th of July brownies and stuck pie evenings. She set the soup on my counter, took one look at the padlock, and her mouth made a small, hard shape. "May I sit?" I said, "You always may," with more relief than any polite sentence can carry. She sat on the old kitchen chair the church men refinished in 2004 and folded her hands like a nurse about to prepare you for an unpleasant truth. "Ruth," she said, "I'm going to be plain. Last week, a young woman from Bailey & Co. knocked on my door and asked if I could confirm whether your house was vacant or coming to market. She said she had a coming soon listing ready for 127 Brookview Lane." The room tilted a degree. I gripped the edge of the counter to remind my knees who was in charge. "I told her to take a hike," Linda continued, "but she handed me a little glossy folder anyway. While she walked back to her SUV, I pulled up Zillow on my phone, and there it was. Your porch swing, coming soon, with a list price that made me say, 'Well, I'll be,' out loud in my own kitchen." She took her phone out of her pocket and swiped to a screenshot. There was my house in the tidy little square of someone else's dream, the words "coming soon" wearing my siding. Linda glanced at the padlock again, lowered her voice. "I didn't say anything because you were in the hospital and I didn't want your oxygen levels to suffer on account of murder. But last night I heard them through my kitchen window. Sound carries when the wind is wrong. Hannah told Cole, as soon as Mom moves to Maple Ridge, we can close. The trust is already signed." Cole said, "If the hip infection had gone the other way, we'd be in a downtown loft by spring." Then they clinked glasses. The words came like ice into my blood. Not like knives. Knives are hot. This was cold. This was a calm kind of betrayal that dresses up like a to-do list. "A trust," I said. My voice sounded like it came from one room over. "I didn't sign a trust." "Linda said," and her hand covered mine like a blanket. "I don't think you did. Not really." It took me exactly as long as it takes to pull a file box out from under a bed to find a manila folder I hadn't put anywhere. Inside were papers sweat-slicked with the feeling of wrongness. A durable power of attorney naming Hannah Mason as my attorney in fact, stamped and notarized with a seal that didn't smell like any bank I've ever trusted. A partially filled quitclaim deed transferring the house to a Mason family trust. My signature curled in the right places, loopy, convincing, except not. An errant stroke where mine would be sure. The muscle memory was all wrong. Somebody had practiced me. I set the folder on the table and sat down very carefully, like you sit when the floor is not the thing holding you. Ruth, said Linda again, and this time she pulled a card from her pocket of her robe. I have a friend from our church legal clinic, Patricia Singh, elder law. She helped my Aunt Myra when her nephew borrowed her house. She's seen every kind of wrong they can do to a person they say they love. She can meet us today at lunch if you want. I wanted like breath. We went to the Bluebird Diner because where else do grown women plan revolutions? We ordered coffee and it arrived hot and bottomless. Patricia came straight from court, navy blazer, hair clipped back, eyes that could read a room and a docket in one look. First things first, she said, when I finished the part of the story that was for strangers' ears. You are not crazy. What you are describing is financial elder abuse. She spoke the words plainly, like a diagnosis and a map. That is a crime in Ohio. We move on 3 fronts: bank, bureaus, and county. We do it today. She wrote neat, intelligent lines on a legal pad. We go to your bank, we revoke all access, set text alerts to your phone only, and request 2 years of statements. Then we place credit freezes with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, so no new lines of credit can be opened in your name. After that, we file a revocation of power of attorney and a letter with the county recorder that any deed involving your property requires your in-person acknowledgement and a capacity certification. If there's a coming soon, we kill it with the cease and desist. I stared at her like she had rolled out of the wall when I said a wish to no one. I just got out of the hospital, I said, because my hip was my hip. I don't know if I have the strength. Patricia's smile was small and kind and not interested in my excuses. You have enough. At the bank, the manager's name tag said Alvarez. His tie was the blue of old lake water. He dialed up 2 years of my life on a screen and his face changed, and the way faces change when they see a child hit by a car. Cash withdrawals I didn't make, app subscriptions I didn't use, transfers to an account ending in numbers that meant nothing to the woman whose life was those numbers, a home equity line pending that felt like someone laying a claim on my breath. Provisional credits will post while we investigate, Mr. Alvarez said. His voice had the respectful anger of a man with a mother. Effective immediately, Hannah Mason and Cole Mason are removed from all view and transaction privileges. New passwords, new 2-factor authentication, alerts to your cell only. We'll flag any home equity paperwork and call you before a printer even gets warm. Patricia slid a printed screenshot of the Zillow coming soon across the desk, and Mr. Alvarez's mouth did a little thing men's mouths do when they want to spit indoors and can't. At the county building, the clerk at the recorder's office, floral blouse, reading glasses on a chain, stamped the revocation of power of attorney and the acknowledgement letter with 2 heavy thonks that went through the countertop and up my arm. I wanted to frame that sound and hang it in the kitchen where my measuring cups used to be. Back in Patricia's Honda, I let my head go back against the seat and closed my eyes. The pain medicine made everything a little lighter and also a little farther away. The world slid past the window in suburban slices. A nail salon called Tipsy, a dog in a sweater peeing on a shrub, a man arguing kindly with the cashier about coupons. Here's how we handled tonight, Patricia said. her hands gripped at 10 and 2 like a sermon. We are not here to fight them. We present the revocation, the fraud reports, and the no listing letter. We make one ask. They pack their things and leave. If they refuse, we call the police and Adult Protective Services, and we proceed with an emergency protective order in the morning. I've already called the non-emergency line. A patrol car will swing by every 30 minutes between 8 and 10 and log their presence. It keeps everyone honest. Leave tonight? I said, my voice wobbling like cheap jello. You are enforcing a boundary, Patricia said. If they want a negotiation about money, we'll offer a civil repayment plan for what can't be returned by the bank. If they refuse, we file criminal. We keep your soul out of their debt. Linda reached back from the passenger seat and patted my knee. Her palm warmed through my slacks. You are not alone. We stopped at the hardware store for a fireproof safe because it felt like buying a spine. We stopped at the grocery store for yogurt and honey and bread that tasted like a farm, because starting a new life should include breakfast. We parked in my driveway at 547, and I sat there with my hands around nothing and watched my porch where a fern used to hang. Ready? Patricia asked. I guess so, I said, because a person can be ready for the end of a thing and still be the person they were when it started. They came home at 6:13 with takeout bags swinging and laughter like they'd never heard their own voices say something ugly. They froze at the sight of Patricia and Linda on my couch and me in the chair between them like a third point in a good triangle. What is this? Hannah asked. The smile had gone from her mouth but still pretended at the edges of her eyes. This is the end of you controlling your mother. She handed Hannah a copy of the revocation, the fraud reports from the bank, the screenshot of the Zillow listing. Hannah looked for the stupid in the text like there would be some, and didn't find it. She turned to me. Mom, what did you do? You don't even understand these papers. Patricia's voice didn't rise. She understands that you forged her signature on a durable power of attorney. She understands that you attempted to encumber this home. She understands that you opened accounts without her consent and moved money that was not yours to move. She understands that she no longer consents to your presence here. Cole's jaw got hard the way men's jaws get hard when they want to be bigger than a situation. You can't just kick us out. We live here. You were guests, Patricia said. As of now, the invitation is rescinded. You will pack your belongings and leave. If you refuse, we will call the police and Adult Protective Services. We'll also file for a protective order in the morning. Additionally, Bailey & Co. has been formally notified that any attempt to market this property will be reported as fraud and will trigger legal action. Hannah turned that look on me, the one that says, "You taught me everything wrong, even the alphabet." "Are you happy?" she asked. "You're choosing a stranger and the neighbor lady over your own daughter?" "I'm choosing myself," I said, and I surprised us all. "I raised you to know the difference between help and control. You locked my food. You locked my heat. You tried to sell the roof over my head. That is not help." For a moment, the house held its breath. Hannah laughed a little, a humorless exhale. "Keep your drafty house and your ugly furniture," she said, gesturing broadly like a realtor who doesn't quite believe in the property. "We were trying to move you somewhere safe. Maple Ridge has on-site care. You would have had bingo and a salon, but sure, go on playing Little House on the Prairie." Cole put his hand on her elbow in a gesture that was almost human. "Let's just pack," he said. She yanked her arm back like he'd burned her. "We have nowhere to go tonight." "Then I suggest you start," Patricia said. They slammed drawers upstairs like punctuation. Linda turned my stove on low and heated the soup she'd brought, because sometimes the only thing to do is the mothering in front of you. Patricia sat with her legal pad and her pen and documented calmly, gently. When Hannah came downstairs with my mother's blue willow plates wrapped in a towel, Patricia said, "Those stay. They were here before you." When Cole appeared with the label maker like a trophy, I said, "Leave it." "Why?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Because I am done with your name on my shelves," I said. By 9:30, the last of the boxes had been slide carried to the trunk of their silver sedan. Hannah stood at the door with her keys in her fist and looked at me in a way that had more history in it than I could lift. "You will regret this when you fall and no one is here, when you can't open a jar, when the heat goes out in February and you sit in your coat waiting for a man from the county to show." I'll take my chances with my neighbor, my church, my own two hands, and not with you. She lifted her chin like she was making a vow to the wrong altar and walked out. Cole didn't even look back at all. The car reversed in the winter dark street and then was gone into the suburban night that eats things for a while and then burps them up in the next town over. I stood in my hallway with the taste of stainless steel and lemon cleaner in my mouth and did not break. Not the way people expect. I didn't crumble like a dry leaf. I put Linda's soup in a bowl, and I ate it, sitting at my table with both hands around the ceramic bowl. When I finished, I took the bolt cutters from the garage and cut that padlock myself. The sound it made when it hit the kitchen tile was a small bell rung in the very big cathedral. I slept that night in my own bed, with the thermostat at 71 and the window cracked an inch to hear the owl that comes back every year. I set my pill organizer for the week with my good glasses on, and my brain turned all the way up. My phone buzzed twice with a message from Bailey & Co. that no, they would not be listing my home. In the morning, Linda sat at my table with 2 cups of coffee and a plate of cinnamon toast. It's amazing how many emotional problems cinnamon toast will at least slow down. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I'm 40 and 90 at the same time," I said, honestly. Patricia stopped by on her way to court with a file folder and the news that Mr. Alvarez had already posted a provisional credit for part of what was taken. "The rest will take time, but we will get it. If Hannah and Cole want to avoid criminal charges, they will sign a civil repayment agreement in the next 10 days and start paying. If not, we proceed criminally and let the county do the math." "Do it either way," I said, surprising myself again. "Do whatever keeps them out of my house and me out of their debt." Patricia smiled in a way that said she had wanted to hear me say it. At noon, I drove with Linda to buy a small, fireproof safe from the office store and a box of plastic sleeves, because putting your life in order sometimes looks like office supplies. We sat at my dining table and slid the deed, the will, the birth certificates, the tax receipts into their plastic skin and felt something like courage in our fingers. Patricia helped me draft a new estate plan the next week. Simple, clear, the kind of plan a person could read and not find a single crevice in. "You'll name a successor trustee who is not a family member, someone you trust to follow instructions," Patricia said. "Linda," I said, and Linda sputtered like she'd been named queen of a small principality and was afraid of the taxes. "Not to make decisions for you," Patricia clarified. "To make sure no document gets changed without your body in a chair and a licensed person attesting to your mind in the room." I put my Singer back on a narrow table under the front window where the light fell right, and the first thing I sewed after oiling the needle was a long, plain runner for the pantry shelf. It didn't need to be beautiful. It needed to be mine. I went to chair yoga on Tuesdays at the community center with a room of women who knew exactly how to groan when a joint moved. I walked the aisle at church and sang the alto part. I learned how to use the county app to report a pothole. I changed the Wi-Fi password and wrote it in a place only my hands could find. I sat on my porch when the snow pretended to give up and watched the neighbor boy try to skateboard on a patch of dry sidewalk, watched his mother call helmet, and watched him pretend he didn't hear. A week after they left, a single-page letter arrived from Hannah's email in Patricia's inbox and then in mine, sent by Patricia's instructions. It said, "We will accept the repayment agreement. We will sell the Peloton and the second TV. We will send you a list of items sold and bank statements. We will start at $300 a month until employment improves. It did not say, I'm sorry. It did not say, I'm grateful you fed me, that you sewed the hem of my prom dress at midnight, that you stood in line at 5 a.m. for the flu shot when I had my first baby at 21, and the world scared me into competence. It said numbers and terms. Patricia approved them with a lawyerly tightening of a screw. The bank returned some money. The fraud investigation found enough to warrant it. The rest came in small monthly proof of life transfers with no words attached. I didn't need words. I needed quiet days in which I could hear my own heart. Sometimes I woke in the ugly hour and thought about the moment at my kitchen table when I first saw the lock. Sometimes I pictured myself as I had been at Hannah's kindergarten orientation, smoothing the front of my dress and pretending I didn't care what the other mothers thought of my shoes. Sometimes I dreamed about Tom, the smell of sawdust and Irish spring, in the pantry, sanding smooth the shelf edges so flour sacks would not catch. In the dream he turned and said, "You okay, Ruthie?" And I said, "I am now." The first time I went back to St. Luke's for physical therapy, I parked crooked, and a volunteer in a red vest smiled like he had time. I walked the hallway with a strap and cane contraption that made me feel like a horse, and did my exercises with a woman named Bree, who had a tattoo of a sunflower on her wrist and the patient severity of a ballet teacher. I built my strength back in 1/4 inch increments. Whenever the pain pulled sharp and hot across the incision, I breathed into it like a contraction and remembered that I had survived my daughter's 36-hour labor by counting the dots in the ceiling tiles. When I went to the grocery store alone for the first time after surgery, I put things into my cart slowly with my good hand, and I cried in the spice aisle for exactly as long as it takes to locate cumin. No one told me a woman could become attached to her own brand of cumin, and when men say women are not loyal, they should be made to watch us pick out cumin with our whole hearts. At my next bank appointment, Mr. Alvarez shook my hand in the way men shake older women's hands when they realize older women are not made of lace. "Your alerts are working," he said. "We'll let you know if there's a hiccup. We flagged their names. Anything they try will ping me." "Is that personal?" I asked, smiling. "It is," he said, and it felt like a blessing you can only receive at a bank. Patricia set me up to speak at the community center in March. The flyer said, "Seniors Against Scams, How to Protect Your Home and Your Heart." I photocopied a photo of the padlock and mounted it on a foam board with little sticky corners. When I stood in front of a half circle of women in good sweaters and comfortable shoes, I said, "Sometimes abuse looks like a bruise. Sometimes it looks like a padlock on a pantry. Either way, the way out starts when you tell someone." An 80-year-old with red lipstick and sharp eyes told me afterward that her grandson managed her money, and she wanted to ask him a few questions now. A woman my age said her brother wanted her to sign a paper for convenience, and did I know a lawyer? I handed them Patricia's card like communion. After the talk, Patricia hugged me. She whispered, "Every time you tell it, it gets lighter for you and heavier for the next person who thinks they can get away with it." Spring in Ohio is a rumor before it becomes a fact. The snow recedes like a man who thinks he's won an argument and then realizes he hasn't. The hydrangeas in front of my porch push green fists into air that still tastes like winter. I bought seed packets from the hardware store and held them like tiny promises. Basil, zinnias, something that claimed it would be sunflowers if God was willing.
On a Tuesday that smelled like rain, I cleaned the pantry. I wiped the shelves with vinegar and water and a rag I'd cut from an old t-shirt. I put the flour and sugar and coffee in glass jars with chalk labels that I wrote myself. My hand, my letters. I left one shelf open and didn't know why. It felt like a theater set waiting for a scene that would either happen or wouldn't. I stood back and looked at the neatness of it until my heart slowed. Linda and I fell into a rhythm like friendship does when it turns from neighborly to something a little toward family. She knocked before she came in, only when she thought I might be naked. I called when a low, sagging feeling came in without permission, and we made tea, and it left with less of its luggage. On Saturdays, she took me to a community rummage sale, and I bought 3 wine glasses with a tiny chip at the seam, because I have always believed that nothing that has lived a life should be perfectly smooth. At the end of May, I saw Hannah at a distance in the produce section at Market Fresh. She was not the kind of daughter who hides well. She had her hair in a low ponytail and wore scrubs that said Parma Community Clinic across the chest. She held 3 avocados and frowned at them like they were being unreasonable. I stood behind a stack of oranges and watched her, without guilt, for 1 minute, and then I put a bag of baby potatoes in my cart and walked away with dignity, because that is what I had promised myself. In early June, a letter arrived in the mail, in an envelope like a thank you note. The handwriting rolled and dipped and was as familiar to my body as the scar on my hip. "Mom," it began, "Patricia says I should not contact you. I'm doing it anyway because I don't know how to be a person and not write to my mother. I am in counseling. Cole and I are not together. I am working at the clinic in Parma, and I am living in an apartment with 2 other women and a couch that sags in the middle. I won't ask to move back in. I won't ask for money. I just want you safe. I am sorry." The letter smelled of nothing and everything. I put it in the safe with the deed, not because I wanted to protect it, because I wanted it to have to sit next to the things that made my life mine. The first big storm of the summer came like a toddler, sudden and loud and over quickly. The power flickered and went out for an hour and came back on with the furnace's thump and the refrigerator's comforting hum. I lit 2 candles on the counter and sat on the floor with a paper towel and wiped up a puddle near the back door, because nobody else's knees live here anymore. On my 69th birthday, Linda baked a sheet cake with too much frosting, and the church kids sang off-key on my porch. The hydrangeas were indecently blue. The sky did that high Ohio thing it does for exactly 3 weeks in June, where you forgive the state everything for 1 month of not fighting with the air. During the lull between the kids' sugar rush and the older folks' storytelling, a small car pulled to the curb. The driver's door opened and Hannah stepped out. She wore a cardigan and a face scrubbed of old defiance. She held nothing. She stood on the sidewalk with her hands empty and her eyes not quite on mine. I stood at the top of my steps and I did not go down. I did not invite her up. The porch rail was warm from the sun through the afternoon, and I put my palm on it the way I do when I feel dizzy and need a watchful wood to hold me upright. "Happy birthday," she called, like a question asked of the air. I said, "Thank you." She said, "I brought..." Nothing, and a smile flickered through a sadness I hadn't seen on her face since she was 8. Patricia said I should ask before bringing anything. I'm learning. "Good," I said. She said, "I won't stay," quickly, like she was afraid of herself. "I just wanted you to see me sober and small." Her voice snagged. "If someday you want me to come to church and sit in the back, I will. If you never do, I will keep paying the clinic back for what they did for me." We looked at each other across the lilacs. The air smelled like flowers and charcoal and cake. I thought of the day she was born and Tom had cried into my shoulder when the nurse snapped a little hat onto our daughter's dark hair. I thought of the time she stole a lipstick and sobbed in my lap in the bathroom, while Tom drove the car around the block and around until he calmed down enough to come home. I thought of the padlock hitting the tile. I thought of my pantry. I said, "It's good to see you working, because a person could drown in words, or you could just put your feet in the water and trust yourself." "It's good to be working," she said, and stepped back toward the car like she was leaving a campsite cleaner than she found it. "Happy birthday, Mom." "Drive safe,"
I said, because sometimes love remembers its lines. She got in her car and drove away, and I stood on my porch, and the world did not tilt. Linda appeared beside me, like a blessing she had set an alarm for, and handed me a plate with the corner piece of cake and 2 forks, because we have decided there are no rules about cake on porches. "You okay?" she asked. "I am," I said, and I didn't have to check. The sun lowered itself into the trees like a careful old man. I watched a teenage boy wobble by on a bike too small for him, heard his mother call out, "Helmet!" from a door down the block, and him say, I know," in the voice of a human animal that will always sound like that between 12 and 20. I thought briefly, tenderly, of my own insistence at that age, of my earnest cruelty, of how lucky we are when our worst selves don't permanently break the people who raised us. Later that night, after the last chair was folded and the porch light made a hopeful cone on the steps, I went to the pantry and opened it just to open it. The flowers sat next to the sugar, sat next to the coffee. A jar of Linda's pickles glowed green. A line of soups I had chosen myself. A stack of noodles. A small bag of walnuts. No labels but the ones God gives things. I put my palm on the mint paint where my husband's roller had once left a faint trail and said into the quiet house, "I live here." I said it again because the walls should hear what they hold. In the fall, I put a small sign on my porch that said, "Welcome friends," and meant it. I put a smaller sign in my head that said, "Not you," and kept it ready. I helped a woman from church list her old car on Facebook Marketplace with a photo that didn't involve her home address and a price that respected dignity. I taught a little girl down the street to sew a straight line, and we watched her confidence gather itself like a good hem. I stood at my window one afternoon and watched storm clouds stack over the trees, and felt something like gratitude for weather that announces itself instead of showing up as a locked pantry. Hannah sent another letter in October. She included no ask. She included 2 photographs, a Polaroid of a potted plant on a windowsill, and a picture of her at the clinic in scrubs, smiling in that small way people do when they are trying on a face they hope to be true. I put the Polaroid on my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a lemon, and I put the clinic photo in a drawer with the good scissors, because hope should be near sharp things. It reminds you to act carefully. On a gray Tuesday, I woke before the alarm because the house made a sound it hadn't made since Tom died. The sound of a house breathing even when you're asleep. The furnace kicked on, the refrigerator hummed. The little mouse I wouldn't tell Linda about tried and failed to be silent in the basement. I lay there and I took an inventory. Hip pain, tolerable. Bank account, steady. Pantry, mine. Heart, busy but obedient. I got out of bed. I made coffee. I buttered toast. I opened the pantry and took down the jar of honey and a clean mug from the left, because everything is where I put it. I clicked the radio on low, and the announcer said the word blustery in a tone I like. I thought about the dozen women in folding chairs at the community center. I thought about the clerk with the stamp, and Mr. Alvarez with the tie, and Patricia with the 10 and 2 hands, and Linda with the pink slippers at my back door. If you had told me a year before that my life would be measured in locks and stamps and a bowl of chicken noodle soup on the stove while someone packed their failures into a trunk, I would not have believed you. If you had told me I would tell my story into a cheap microphone and women would line up like penitent saints, not because of me, but because my pantry looked like theirs, I would have said no, not me. I'm private, I manage. But I have learned that privacy can be a house where people hurt you quietly. I have learned that managing sometimes is code for I am letting myself be erased. I have learned that boundaries are not betrayal. They are stewardship of our homes, our names, our peace. I have learned that love without accountability isn't love. It's appetite. On the first truly cold day of winter, I opened the pantry and lifted down a box of tea. I brewed a cup and carried it to the front window where the light wasn't generous, but it showed me my own hands. They looked like my mother's, and for the first time in a long time, that felt like a blessing. not a sentence. I stood there with my tea and watched the mail truck stop at my house, and the next, and the next. The carrier steps lightly, even on icy days. He waved, and I waved, and my neighbor's dog barked, and I laughed, because that dog is proof that joy finds the smallest excuses. And I remembered the thing I tell the women at the community center when the air goes out of their faces. This is your house. Even when the heat is low, and the light is mean, and your hip aches, and the past sits on your chest, this is your house, your pantry, your name on the deed, your breath in the rooms. Don't let anyone sell that for the price of their convenience. I rinsed my mug. I set it on the drying rack. I opened the pantry and put the tea back where it belonged. I ran my hand along the shelf, over the plain runner I had sewn on an ordinary Monday with a needle that had made 1,000 small decisions on my behalf. And I said it one more time for the road. I live here.